It was a cold but sunny autumn morning. Yellow leaves danced on the streets with the wind, and a light drizzle filled the air with a melancholic scent. Jack, in his mid-50s, sat behind the wheel of his yellow cab, driving through the familiar streets of a small town as another day began. With years of experience came a quiet wisdom. Every passenger, every trip carried its own story. But Jack didn't yet know that this morning would be unlike any other. He spotted the silhouettes of two children through a thin layer of fog by the side of the road. The older one, a boy about 12 years old, stood holding the hand of a younger girl who looked no older than 8. The girl wore a woolen hat and clutched a small, slightly wilted bouquet of daisies. Jack slowed the car and rolled down his window. "Are you waiting for someone, kids?" he asked gently, his voice kind but curious. The boy hesitated before stepping closer. "No, sir. But we need to get somewhere," he said with a serious tone beyond his years. "If you can take us." Jack's face softened. "Of course. Where do you need to go?" The children exchanged a quick glance, and Jack could sense this trip was important to them. The boy quietly answered, "To see our dad." Jack paused for a moment. This journey was clearly going to be more than a simple ride. He opened the door and said, "Hop in." Jack drove in focused silence. The hum of the engine and the rhythmic sound of the tires on the asphalt were the only noises in the cab. The children sat side by side in the back seat, staring out the windows at the scenery. Yet Jack could tell they were lost in thought. The little girl occasionally adjusted her bouquet, smoothing the petals with pursed lips. The boy kept his eyes fixed on the road ahead, his small hands gripping his knees tightly. Jack sensed that something was off about this silence, but he wasn't sure how to break it. Years of driving had taught him that people tell their stories not just through words, but through the weight of their silences. These children, however, seemed reluctant to share theirs. After a while, Jack gave in to his curiosity. He glanced at them in the rearview mirror and softly asked, "What's your dad like?" The boy stopped looking out the window and turned to Jack that he hesitated, as if carefully considering how to answer. Finally, with a maturity beyond his years, he said, "He's the best dad." His words were brief but firm. For a moment, Jack's gaze lingered on the boy's face in the mirror. The boy's serious, determined tone sparked something in Jack, a flicker of intrigue. Before Jack could respond, the little girl spoke up excitedly. "Yeah, he tells the funniest stories," she exclaimed, clapping her hands with delight. After thinking for a second, she added, "And he takes us to the park. One time, he even saved a squirrel." Jack smiled. The little girl's joy seemed to lift the heavy mood in the cab for a moment. "Saved a squirrel? That's impressive," Jack said with genuine admiration. "How'd he do that?" The girl paused, carefully setting her bouquet on her lap before gesturing animatedly. "The squirrel was stuck in the branches of a tree. Dad climbed up and got it out. Then he told us how brave we were because we were scared, but he wasn't scared at all." Jack chuckled as he listened to the story. The children's admiration and love for their father shone through every word. Their bond stirred a warm feeling in Jack, but it also felt like something was missing. The way they talked about their dad felt almost like they were reaching for a memory, touching it but never quite holding it. Jack decided to probe a little further. "Your dad sounds like a wonderful man," he said. "What does he do for work?" This question brought a subtle change to the boy's expression. A shadow crossed his face as he hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Eventually, he bowed his head slightly, looking back out the window as he answered in a quiet voice, "He does everything. He's our hero." Jack considered the simplicity of the boy's words and the depth they carried. The admiration was clear, but there was something unspoken, something left unsaid. Though Jack felt the oddity in the boy's tone, he chose not to press further. It wasn't his place to question the children's love for their father. As the cab drove further out of town, the road lined with trees glowing in autumn hues, the little girl leaned eagerly against the window. "This is it," she said with excitement. "Dad used to bring us here for picnics. Mom came with us, too." The boy smiled faintly. "Yeah," he said softly. "The last time we came here, Dad taught me how to fish. He was so patient. At first, I didn't catch anything, but then I caught a tiny fish. We let it go right away because Dad said we shouldn't hurt animals. Their words painted a warm picture of family life. Jack couldn't help but feel a pang of emotion. Their stories brought back memories of his own childhood, memories he hadn't revisited in years. Suddenly, he was overwhelmed by a bittersweet mixture of peace and longing. When they reached the gates of a cemetery, Jack felt his heart skip a beat. He glanced at the children in the rearview mirror, confused. "What are we doing here?" he asked cautiously, his voice tinged with unease. The boy responded quietly, "We're here to see our dad." Jack froze as the weight of those words sank in. He realized slowly and painfully that he had misunderstood. The little girl opened the door, clutching her daisies tightly. "These were his favorite flowers," she said with a small smile. Jack watched in silence as the children walked toward the gravestones, a bouquet and a small box in hand. A cold wave of understanding washed over him. He remained seated, watching as they stopped at a headstone, placed the flowers carefully, and knelt in prayer. Jack eventually stepped out of the cab, curiosity drawing him closer. As he approached, the inscription on the gravestone came into focus. "John Miller, beloved father and husband. Forever in our hearts." Jack's breath caught in his throat. Everything the children had said now made sense. Their father wasn't waiting for them at home. He was here, beneath this cold, silent stone. The boy turned to Jack and gave him a faint smile. "He's still with us," he said softly. "We know he's always here." Jack looked at the gravestone and then at the children. A buried ache resurfaced within him. Memories of his own father filled his mind. The unresolved regrets, the unspoken words. He realized that he, too, had avoided facing his past for far too long. After dropping the children off, Jack sat in his cab for a long time, lost in thought. The children's visit to their father's grave had stirred something in him, something he could no longer ignore. The next morning, for the first time in years, Jack drove to a cemetery, not for a passenger, but to finally visit his own father's grave. Sometimes, the smallest journeys lead to the most profound reckonings. Enjoyed the story? Don't keep it to yourself. Share it with a friend. Hit that like button and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Let's spread the inspiration together.